the woman guiding that overloaded wagon across the frozen surface of the Yellowstone River, moved with such practiced determination that Zachary Lawson felt something shift in his chest before he even saw her face clearly. It was January of 1883, and the Montana Territory winter had frozen the river solid enough for crossings, though most folks with sense waited for company before attempting such a dangerous passage. Not this one. Zachary stood on the southern bank near the trading post, his breath creating white clouds in the bitter air as he watched the scene unfold. The wagon groaned under the weight of what looked like mining equipment, tools and crates of supplies. The two horses pulling it stepped cautiously, their hooves finding purchase on the ice as the driver urged them forward with a steady voice that carried across the frozen expanse. "That woman's either the bravest soul in Montana or the most foolish," said Pete Morgan, the trading post owner who stood beside Zachary. "Been making these runs alone for near on 2 months now. Every time I tell her to wait for an escort, she just tips her hat and keeps on moving." Zachary adjusted his hat against the wind and studied the crossing more carefully. The river was about 200 feet across at this point, and the ice had held well through the cold snap, but there were always weak spots where the current ran faster beneath. He could see the careful path she had chosen, avoiding the darker patches where the ice might be thinner. "What's her name?" Zachary asked, though he was not sure why it mattered. He had only ridden into this settlement yesterday, planning to winter here before heading west come spring. His cattle operation down in Wyoming had done well enough to give him options, and at 27 years old, he had been restless for something new. "Eleanor Brennan," Pete said. "Runs a mining operation about 6 miles north with her 2 brothers. Good Irish family, been here about 3 years. Father died of pneumonia last winter, left them the claim. It is not much, but they work it honest." Zachary watched as Eleanor navigated the wagon past a rough patch of ice, her movements fluid and confident. She wore a heavy wool coat and a wide-brimmed hat tied down with a scarf, but even from this distance, he could see the set of her jaw, the straight line of her back. This was not a woman playing at frontier life. This was someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The wagon was about 3/4 of the way across when Zachary heard it, a sound like a rifle shot echoing across the ice. A crack. Eleanor heard it too. She immediately halted the horses, her hand going up in a calming gesture. The animals froze, their ears swiveling nervously. Zachary's heart hammered as he watched her slowly climb down from the wagon seat, moving with excruciating care. Another crack sounded, this one louder, and Zachary saw the dark line split across the ice about 10 feet ahead of the wagon. "Damn it all," Pete muttered. "Ice must be weaker there from the warm spell we had 3 days back." Zachary was already moving. He strode to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Ranger, and pulled a coil of rope from his saddle. "How deep is it there?" 8, maybe 10 feet in that section, current strong." "If she goes through." Pete did not finish the sentence. Zachary tied one end of the rope around his waist and handed the other end to Pete. "Keep this tight. If I go in, pull me out fast." "You don't even know her," Pete said, but he was already wrapping the rope around a hitching post. "Don't need to," Zachary replied and stepped onto the ice. He moved quickly but carefully, spreading his weight as evenly as possible. The ice groaned beneath him, and he could feel the slight give of it with each step. Eleanor had turned at the sound of his approach, and even with her scarf covering most of her face, he could see her eyes. They were green, sharp as spring grass, and filled with a mixture of concern and calculation. "Stay back," she called out. "This ice will not hold two." "It is holding me fine so far," Zachary called back, though his heart was racing. "You need help getting this wagon across." I need you to not add your weight to an already compromised situation, Eleanor shot back. She had moved to the horses' heads and was stroking their noses, keeping them calm. I have done this before. Another crack split the air, and this time Zachary saw the ice web beneath the right rear wheel of the wagon. Water began to seep up through the cracks, dark and menacing. "Not like this, you have not," Zachary said. He was close enough now to see her properly. She was younger than he had expected, probably no more than 23 or 24, with auburn hair escaping from beneath her hat, and a dusting of freckles across her nose that was red from the cold. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was completely focused on the problem at hand. "Listen to me carefully," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the danger. "The ice ahead is solid. I can feel the horses shifting. If I can get the wagon moving slowly, we can make it to shore before this section gives way completely. But only if there is not extra weight." Zachary looked back at the shore, then at the ice ahead. She was right. The dark line of the crack had not spread further forward, and the ice there looked thick and blue. "What do you need?" "I need you to go back to shore and be ready with that rope," Eleanor said. "If we go through, I will need to get the horses free fast, and having someone on solid ground will help." It went against every instinct. Zachary had to turn around and leave her there, but the certainty in her voice convinced him. This woman knew what she was doing. He nodded and carefully made his way back to the bank, the rope still around his waist. "She is sending you back?" Pete asked, incredulous. "She knows the ice better than we do," Zachary said, though his hands were shaking slightly as he untied the rope and prepared to throw it if needed. Eleanor had climbed back onto the wagon seat. She spoke to the horses in a low, soothing voice that Zachary could not quite make out, and then she clicked her tongue. The wagon began to move, inch by careful inch. The ice groaned and cracked beneath the wheels, water spreading across the surface, but Eleanor kept the horses moving at that same steady pace. Zachary held his breath. The wagon cleared the compromised section, then rolled onto the thicker ice. The horses' hooves found better purchase, and Eleanor let them pick up speed just slightly. Within 2 minutes, the wagon was rolling up onto the southern bank, and Eleanor was setting the brake. A small crowd had gathered from the trading post and the few buildings that made up this settlement. They clapped and called out greetings as Eleanor climbed down from the wagon. She waved them off with a tired smile and began checking her horses and cargo. Zachary approached more slowly, coiling his rope. Now that the danger had passed, he felt oddly nervous. Eleanor was brushing ice from one of the horse's legs, murmuring to the animal. "That was well done," Zachary said. Eleanor looked up at him, and he felt that shift in his chest again, stronger this time. Up close, her eyes were even more striking, intelligent, and warm despite their current wariness. "Thank you for the rope," she said, "and for being willing to help, even if it was foolish to step out there." "Seemed like the right thing to do," Zachary said. He extended his hand. "Zachary Lawson." She pulled off her glove and shook his hand. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused from work. "Eleanor Brennan. Most people call me Ellie. Pete was telling me about your mining operation," Zachary said, trying to think of something to say that did not sound like he was prying. "That is a heavy load you are hauling." "New pump equipment," Ellie said, patting one of the crates. "Been saving for months. With the spring melt coming in a few months, we will need it to keep the lower shafts clear." She smiled then, and it transformed her whole face. "If I can get it home without losing it to the river, that is." "You do this run alone often?" Zachary asked. Ellie's smile faded slightly, though not in an unfriendly way. "My brothers manage the mine. I manage the logistics. We each do what we are best at." She finished checking the horses and moved to inspect the wagon wheels. "Besides, I like the independence. Not many women can say they ferry supplies across frozen rivers. Not many men can say it either, Zachary said. Least not ones who live long. That earned him another smile. Fair enough. Are you new to the area? I have not seen you at the trading post before. Just arrived yesterday from Wyoming, Zachary said. Planning to winter here, maybe scout some land for cattle come spring. Cattle, Ellie said, nodding. That is solid work. Better than gambling on gold, truth be told, though do not tell my brothers I said so. She climbed back up onto the wagon seat. I should get moving. Still have 6 miles to cover before dark, and I do not want to navigate that trail in the blackness. Zachary found himself speaking before he had fully thought it through. Mind if I ride along? That is a lonely trail, and after what just happened on the ice, seems like company might not be the worst idea. Ellie studied him for a long moment, and Zachary had the distinct feeling he was being measured and weighed. You are welcome to ride alongside, she finally said, but I do not need protection, just so we are clear. Would not dream of suggesting otherwise, Zachary said, and he meant it. This was not a woman who needed rescuing. She had proved that on the ice, but that did not mean he was ready to let her ride out of his sight just yet. He mounted Ranger and fell in beside the wagon as Ellie guided it north along the trail that followed the river. The afternoon sun was already sinking low, casting long blue shadows across the snow. The temperature was dropping fast, and Zachary could feel the bite of the wind through his coat. So what brings a cattleman to Montana in the dead of winter? Ellie asked after they had ridden in companionable silence for a while. Most sensible folks wait for spring to travel. Restlessness, mainly, Zachary admitted. I have been working the same spread in Wyoming for 5 years, built it up from nothing, got it turning a profit. But lately I have been feeling like there is something else I should be doing, somewhere else I should be. And you think Montana is that somewhere? Ellie asked. Do not know yet, Zachary said. But watching you cross that river today, seeing how you handled that situation, it made me think maybe this territory has more to offer than I realized. Ellie glanced at him, and there was something soft in her expression that had not been there before. The Montana Territory is not for the faint of heart, she said. But if you have got grit and you are willing to work, the land gives back. My family has found that to be true anyway. Tell me about your brothers, Zachary said. What are they like? Dermot and Finn, Ellie said, and there was clear affection in her voice. Dermot is the oldest, 32. He is serious, methodical, knows more about geology and mineral deposits than anyone I have ever met. Finn is 26, full of energy and optimism. They balance each other out. And then there is me in the middle at 24, trying to keep them both fed and supplied while they dig around in the earth. Sounds like you are the glue holding it together, Zachary said. I do what needs doing, Ellie said simply. Same as everyone out here. They rode on as the sun sank lower, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and pink. Zachary found himself watching Ellie more than the scenery. The way she handled the wagon, the easy competence of her movements, the sharp intelligence in her eyes when she looked at him. He had known plenty of women in his life, had even thought himself close to love once or twice, but he had never felt this immediate sense of recognition, as if some part of him had been waiting to meet this particular person. You are staring, Ellie said, though she did not sound displeased. Sorry, Zachary said, not sorry at all. I was just thinking you are unlike anyone I have met before. Is that a compliment or a concern? Ellie asked, but there was a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Definitely a compliment, Zachary said. Back in Wyoming, the women I knew were either working saloons or married to ranchers, and most of them seemed to be trying to fit into a very particular mold of what a frontier woman should be. You do not seem to care much about molds. Life is too short to spend it being what other people think you should be, Ellie said. My mother taught me that before she died. She was Irish, came over during the famine with nothing but the clothes on her back and a determination to make a better life. She never let anyone tell her what she could or could not do, and she raised me the same way. She sounds like a remarkable woman, Zachary said. She was, Ellie said softly. Died when I was 16, cholera outbreak, lost her and my youngest brother in the same week. She was quiet for a moment. That is when I learned that grief is just love with nowhere to go. You take that love and you put it into living, into making something good out of what you have left. Zachary felt a tightness in his throat. I lost my mother young too, he said. Never knew my father. She raised me on her own, working as a seamstress in Denver. She died when I was 18, and I used what little money she had saved to buy my first 3 head of cattle. Built everything from there. Then you understand, Ellie said, and the look she gave him was full of a recognition that matched what he had been feeling. You understand what it means to take nothing and turn it into something. I do, Zachary said. The trail wound upward into the hills, and as they crested a ridge, Zachary saw a valley spread out below them. A small cabin sat near a creek, with a larger structure that must be the mine entrance visible on the hillside beyond. Smoke rose from the cabin's chimney, and as they descended toward it, 2 men emerged to greet them. About time, the taller of the 2 called out. He had the same auburn hair as Ellie, though his was shot through with gray at the temples. We were starting to worry. The ice was tricky today, Ellie said as she pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the cabin. Had to take it slow. Dermot, Finn, this is Zachary Lawson. He is wintering in the area. Dermot, the older brother, looked Zachary up and down with a measuring gaze not unlike his sister's. Finn, younger and with a more open expression, stepped forward with an extended hand. Any friend of Ellie's is welcome here, he said. Though I have to say, not many folks get Ellie to accept company on her supply runs. I was persistent, Zachary said, shaking Finn's hand and then Dermot's. More like I took pity on him after he tried to rescue me on the ice, Ellie said dryly. She was already climbing down and starting to unhitch the horses. Zachary moved to help without thinking, and she did not stop him. The ice cracked, Dermot asked sharply. A bit, near the middle section, Ellie said. Nothing I could not handle, but it was close. Dermot's expression darkened. That is the 3rd time this winter we have had trouble with that crossing. Maybe we need to start routing through the mountain pass instead. That adds 2 days to the trip, Ellie said. We cannot afford that kind of delay right now, not with spring orders coming in. We cannot afford to lose you to the river either, Dermot said, and there was real fear beneath the gruffness of his voice. I am fine, Ellie said firmly. The ice held. I made it. Let us focus on getting this equipment unloaded before it is full dark. The 4 of them worked together to unload the wagon, carrying the heavy crates and equipment into a storage shed beside the cabin. Zachary found himself falling into an easy rhythm with the Brennans, and he noticed that Ellie moved among her brothers with the same casual authority she had shown on the ice. These were people who worked together often, who trusted each other completely. When the work was done and the horses had been stabled and fed, Dermot invited Zachary to stay for supper. It is a long ride back to the settlement in the dark, he said, and Ellie makes a decent stew. You are welcome to the spare bunk for the night if you want it. Zachary glanced at Ellie, who gave a small nod. I would appreciate that, he said. The cabin was small but well maintained, with a large fireplace dominating one wall and a table that looked handmade but sturdy. Ellie hung her coat and hat, and Zachary saw that her hair fell in waves past her shoulders when she unpinned it. She caught him looking again and raised an eyebrow, but there was no reproach in it. Supper was indeed stew, thick with venison and root vegetables, along with fresh bread that Finn had apparently baked that morning. The conversation flowed easily, covering everything from the challenges of winter mining to the political situation in the territory. Zachary learned that the Brennans were hoping Montana would achieve statehood soon, and that they had strong opinions about land rights and the treatment of the indigenous tribes whose territory this had been before the settlers arrived. The Crow people had a treaty guaranteeing them these lands, Dermot said, his voice tight with anger. And the government has whittled it down to almost nothing, pushing them onto smaller and smaller reservations. It is a disgrace. A lot of miners do not see it that way, Zachary said carefully. They think they have got the right to take what they can find. A lot of miners are short-sighted fools, Ellie said bluntly. You cannot build a civilization on broken promises and stolen land. Eventually, that foundation crumbles. Zachary found himself nodding. I agree with you, he said. Back in Wyoming, I worked with some Shoshone families who were trying to maintain their traditional grazing lands. The cattlemen kept pushing them out, claiming the land was empty and available. It was not right. What did you do about it? Finn asked. Not as much as I should have, Zachary admitted. I tried to speak up at a few meetings, but I was young and nobody wanted to listen. Eventually, the families moved on to the reservation. I have regretted not fighting harder ever since. Ellie looked at him with something like approval in her eyes. At least you recognize it, she said. Most folks do not even do that much. After supper, Dermot and Finn went outside to check on some equipment they had left near the mine entrance, leaving Zachary and Ellie alone to clean up. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, washing dishes in a basin of heated water. Your brothers seem like good men, Zachary said. They are the best, Ellie said. They have always treated me like an equal partner, never tried to protect me from the hard work or the hard decisions. I know that is rare. It is, Zachary agreed. Most men I know would not let their sister ferry supplies alone across frozen rivers. Most sisters would not want to, Ellie said with a grin, but I have never been very good at doing what I am supposed to. I am starting to realize that, Zachary said. He dried the last plate and set it on the shelf, then turned to face her fully. Can I ask you something? You can ask, Ellie said. Whether I answer is another matter. That moment on the ice when you told me to go back to shore, you were not scared at all, were you? Zachary asked. You were completely calm. Ellie considered this. I was not scared, she said slowly. But fear is not useful in situations like that. Panic kills people. Clear thinking and steady hands keep you alive. So I choose to focus on what I can control and let the fear burn itself out on its own. That is remarkable, Zachary said quietly. No, Ellie said. It is necessary. Out here, you learn to master your emotions or they master you. Zachary wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that he had been thinking about her non-stop since he had first seen her on that ice, that watching her work and talk and move through the world had awakened something in him he had not known was sleeping. But it was too soon, too much. So instead he just said, I am glad I met you today. Ellie's expression softened. I am glad too, she said. It is not often I meet someone who understands why I do what I do. Dermot and Finn returned then, stamping snow from their boots and bringing a gust of cold air with them. The spell was broken, but Zachary caught Ellie's eye across the room and saw that she felt it too, this thing growing between them. He slept that night on a narrow bunk in the corner of the cabin's main room, listening to the wind howl outside and the quiet breathing of the Brennan siblings in their separate sleeping areas. Tomorrow, he would ride back to the settlement and try to figure out what he was doing in Montana. But tonight, He let himself imagine a future that included a certain green-eyed woman who crossed frozen rivers alone and did not know how to give up. Morning came cold and bright. Zachary woke to find Ellie already up and making coffee, moving quietly around the cabin's kitchen area. Dermot and Finn were still asleep. "You are an early riser," Zachary said softly, not wanting to wake the others. "Habit," Ellie said. "The good hours are in the morning before the world gets too noisy." She poured him a cup of coffee and handed it to him. "Sleep well." "Better than I expected," Zachary said, accepting the cup gratefully. The coffee was strong and hot, exactly what he needed. "Though I kept thinking about that ice crossing. You really do that every week?" "Sometimes twice a week, depending on what we need," Ellie said. She settled into a chair across from him with her own coffee. "The river will thaw in another month or two, and then I will take the ferry. That is actually more dangerous because of the current, but at least I do not have to worry about the ice breaking. You ever think about asking for help?" Zachary asked. "Not because you need it," he added quickly, "but because it would be safer with two. I think about it," Ellie admitted. "But help costs money or favors, and we are stretched thin as it is. Every dollar we spend on an extra hand is a dollar we cannot put into the mine or the equipment." She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "Why do you ask?" Zachary took a breath. "Because I am thinking about staying in the area longer than I planned, and if I do, I would like to help. No payment needed, just a chance to get to know this territory better, and to get to know you better if I am being honest." Ellie was quiet for a long moment, studying him with those sharp green eyes. "You barely know me," she said finally. "What if you get to know me and decide you do not like what you find?" "I will take that risk," Zachary said. "I have got a feeling about you, Ellie Brennan. A feeling that says you are exactly the kind of person I have been looking for, even if I did not know I was looking." A faint blush colored Ellie's cheeks, barely visible in the early morning light. "That is quite a thing to say to someone you just met." "I know," Zachary said, "but I have learned not to ignore my instincts. They have kept me alive and brought me this far. And right now, every instinct I have is telling me that meeting you yesterday was not a coincidence." Ellie stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. "I do not believe in fate," she said quietly. "I believe we make our own paths. But I also believe in paying attention when something feels right." She turned back to him. "This feels right. You being here, this conversation. It should not, we are strangers, but it does." Zachary stood and moved to join her at the window. "Then let us not be strangers," he said. "Let me help with the next supply run. Let me learn about the mine, about your operation. Let me prove that I am serious about being here." "And what about your cattle operation in Wyoming?" Ellie asked. "You just going to abandon that?" "I've got a good foreman," Zachary said. "He can manage things for a few months while I figure out what I want to do next. And if I decide to stay in Montana permanently, I can sell the herd or have them driven up here in the spring." Ellie searched his face, and whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. "All right," she said. "You can help with the next run, which is in 4 days. But I warn you, I have high standards. If you slow me down or get in the way, I will send you packing." "Fair enough," Zachary said, extending his hand. "You have got yourself a partner, at least for the next supply run." Ellie shook his hand, and the contact sent a jolt through him that had nothing to do with the cold. "Just for the supply run," she said, but there was a smile in her voice that suggested she was thinking beyond that too. Dermot and Finn woke shortly after, and over breakfast, Ellie explained the arrangement to her brothers. Dermot looked skeptical, but Finn seemed genuinely pleased. "It will be good for Ellie to have company," Finn said. "And we could use an extra hand around here if you are willing to work, Zachary." "I am," Zachary assured him. I have done just about every job there is on a ranch. If it needs doing, I can probably do it. Can you handle a pickaxe? Dermot asked, and there was a challenge in his voice. Never tried, Zachary admitted, but I am willing to learn. That seemed to mollify Dermot somewhat. Fair enough. We have got some shoring up to do in the lower tunnel. If you want to make yourself useful, you can help with that today. Zachary spent the next 4 days working alongside Dermot and Finn in the mine, learning the back-breaking work of extracting gold from the Montana earth. It was different from ranching, more enclosed and claustrophobic, but there was a satisfaction to it that he had not expected. And in the evenings, he would sit with the Brennans around their table, sharing meals and stories, learning the rhythms of their life. But it was the time with Ellie that he treasured most. She would show him around the property, pointing out where they hoped to expand the mine, where she wanted to plant a garden in the spring. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing, their conversation ranging from philosophy to practical matters like the best way to preserve venison. You are different from the men I usually meet, Ellie said one evening as they stood outside the cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. Most of them either treat me like I am fragile or like I am trying to be a man. You just treat me like a person. That is because that is what you are, Zachary said. A person who happens to be brave and smart and capable. Your being a woman does not change any of that. My mother would have liked you, Ellie said softly. She always said the measure of a man was how he treated those who had no power over him. You have been kind to everyone here, even though you do not need anything from us. I do need something from you, Zachary said, turning to face her fully. I need to know if you feel this thing between us. Because I have been trying to play it casual, trying not to move too fast, but the truth is I have been thinking about you every minute since I saw you on that ice. Ellie was quiet for a long moment, her green eyes luminous in the fading light. I feel it, she admitted. It scares me a little how strong it is. I have always been so focused on survival, on keeping the mine going and my brothers fed. I have not let myself think about things like love or partnership. And now, Zachary asked, hardly daring to breathe. Now I am thinking maybe there is room for both, Ellie said. Maybe I can keep the mine going and have something for myself too. She stepped closer to him. But I need you to understand something, Zachary. I am not going to change who I am. I am not going to stop ferrying supplies or working the mine or speaking my mind. If we do this, if we see where this feeling goes, you have to accept all of me. I do not want you to change, Zachary said fiercely. The woman I met on that ice, the woman who told me to get back to shore because she knew what she was doing, that is the woman I am falling for. I would not want her any other way. Ellie reached up and touched his face, her calloused hand gentle against his cheek. Then I think we should see where this goes, she said, and kissed him. The kiss was everything Zachary had imagined and more, soft and fierce at once, full of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Ellie was smiling in a way he had not seen before, open and full of joy. Well then, she said, I guess you are definitely coming on that supply run tomorrow. The next morning they set out together for the trading post. The ice on the Yellowstone was still solid, though Zachary could see more water seepage than there had been on his first crossing. Spring was coming slowly but surely, and the river would thaw soon. Tell me about your life in Wyoming, Ellie said as they made their way down the trail. What was it like building that cattle operation? Zachary told her about the early years, the struggle to keep his small herd alive through brutal winters, the satisfaction of seeing the operation grow. He told her about the land he had claimed, the small cabin he had built with his own hands, the neighbors who had become friends. It sounds like you built something good there, Ellie said. Are you sure you want to leave it behind? "I built something functional," Zachary said. "But I am not sure it was ever home, not really. It was something to do, a way to survive and prove I could make it, but I always felt like I was waiting for something." "And now?" Ellie asked. "Now I think maybe I found what I was waiting for," Zachary said, looking at her. They reached the trading post by mid-morning and loaded the wagon with the supplies the Brennans had ordered: flour and sugar, new rope, lamp oil, and other necessities. Pete Morgan gave Zachary a knowing look when he saw them together. "Figured you might stick around," Pete said. "You had that look about you, watching her cross the ice." "What look?" Zachary asked. "The look of a man who just found something he did not know he was missing," Pete said with a grin. The return journey was slower because of the heavy load, and they took extra care crossing the ice. Zachary walked ahead at one point, testing the surface, while Ellie guided the horses from the wagon seat. They worked together seamlessly, communicating with small gestures and brief words, already developing the kind of shorthand that came with trust and understanding. When they reached the northern bank safely, Ellie let out a long breath. "That is it for ice crossings," she said. "Next time, the thaw will be too far along. We will have to use the ferry or wait for the bridge to be repaired." "When is that supposed to happen?" Zachary asked. "The territorial government keeps promising spring, but who knows," Ellie said. "They have been promising for 2 years now." They made it back to the mine by late afternoon, and Dermot and Finn helped them unload. Over the next several weeks, Zachary settled into a routine with the Brennans. He worked in the mine during the day, learning the trade from Dermot's patient instruction. In the evenings, he would help Ellie with the accounts and inventory, his head for numbers proving useful in tracking their expenses and profits. And whenever they could steal time alone, he and Ellie would walk the property, talking about their hopes and dreams. Zachary told her about his idea to combine cattle ranching with mining, using the profits from one to support the other during lean times. Ellie told him about her dream of expanding the operation, bringing in more modern equipment, maybe even hiring a few hands to help with the work. "We could be something special," Ellie said one evening as they sat on a fallen log overlooking the valley. Spring was beginning to show itself in patches of bare ground and the first tiny green shoots pushing through the snow. A real partnership, equal in every way. "I would like that," Zachary said. "I would like that more than anything." "Then we should probably make it official," Ellie said, and there was a tremor in her voice that betrayed her nervousness despite her bold words. Zachary turned to her, his heart suddenly pounding. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that I love you," Ellie said simply. "I know it has been only 2 months, and maybe that is too fast, but I know my own heart. I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you, and life is too short and too uncertain to waste time pretending otherwise." "I love you too," Zachary said, the words coming easily because they were true as anything he had ever said. "I think I have loved you since I saw you on that ice, so fierce and certain and absolutely yourself." "So then we should get married," Ellie said, and it was not quite a question but not quite a statement either. "Yes," Zachary said. "Yes, we should, as soon as possible." Ellie laughed, and the sound was pure happiness. "I never thought I would be the kind of woman who got married. I always figured I would be too busy, too focused on survival. But with you, it does not feel like giving anything up. It feels like gaining everything." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in the nearest real town, a place called Livingston about 20 miles south. Dermot and Finn stood up with them, along with Pete Morgan and a few other folks from the trading post who had become friends. Ellie wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, and Zachary wore his best suit, the one he had brought from Wyoming for occasions just like this. The minister was an old man who had been in Montana since the gold rush days, and he spoke about the importance of partnership and perseverance in frontier life. "Marriage out here is not just about love," he said, "though that is the foundation. It is about two people choosing to build something together, to face whatever comes side by side. That is what makes a union strong enough to last." When Zachary kissed Ellie as his wife, he felt like every choice he had ever made had been leading to this moment. All the hard years in Wyoming, the restlessness that had driven him north, even the random decision to stop at that particular trading post on that particular day, it had all been necessary to bring him here. They spent their wedding night in a small hotel in Livingston, the first time they had been truly alone together. Ellie was nervous at first, despite her usual confidence, and Zachary took his time, treating her with a gentleness that made her eyes shine with tears. "I never thought I could have this," she whispered against his shoulder afterward. "Someone who sees all of me and loves me anyway." "I do not love you anyway," Zachary said, stroking her hair. "I love you because of who you are, all of it." They returned to the mine the next day to find that Dermot and Finn had strung up congratulation signs and prepared a celebratory dinner. The four of them ate and drank and talked late into the night, making plans for the future. "With four of us working together, we can expand faster," Dermot said, his usual seriousness softened by whiskey and happiness. "Zachary, if you are serious about bringing some cattle up from Wyoming, we could clear that southern meadow for grazing. Give us another income stream." "I am serious," Zachary said. "I will ride down next month, settle my affairs, and bring the herd back before summer." "I will come with you," Ellie said immediately. "I want to see where you came from." So in early May, when the passes had cleared enough for travel, Zachary and Ellie made the journey south to Wyoming. It took them nearly 2 weeks, traveling carefully with the horses and camping along the way. Ellie proved to be as capable on the trail as she was everywhere else, setting up camp and hunting small game with an easy competence that made Zachary fall in love with her all over again. His ranch in Wyoming looked smaller than he remembered, and when he walked the property with Ellie, showing her the cabin and the pastures, he realized that his heart was not there anymore. This place had served its purpose, had taught him what he needed to know, but it was no longer home. "You built something good here," Ellie said, echoing her words from months before. "But I can see why you are ready to move on." They spent a week settling Zachary's affairs, selling the property to his foreman who had always wanted land of his own, and preparing the cattle for the drive north. Zachary kept his best breeding stock, about 50 head, and hired 2 young cowboys to help drive them to Montana. The journey back was slower and harder, moving the cattle through mountain passes and across rivers swollen with snowmelt. But Ellie handled it all with her usual determination, and Zachary found himself constantly amazed by her. She could gentle a spooked steer as easily as she could calculate profit margins, could ride all day without complaint, and still had energy to help set up camp at night. They reached the mine in late June, and Dermot and Finn had the southern meadow cleared and fenced as promised. The cattle settled in well, and soon Zachary had established a routine that split his time between working the mine and managing the small herd. That first summer as a married couple was hard work, but deeply satisfying. Zachary and Ellie had moved into a small cabin they built on the property, giving them privacy while still keeping them close to Dermot and Finn. They would wake before dawn and work until after dark, but they were building something together, exactly as the minister had described. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of their cabin and watch the sun set over the mountains. Ellie would lean against Zachary's shoulder and they would talk about the day's work, about their plans, about the life they were creating. "I am happy," Ellie said one night, and there was wonder in her voice. "Truly happy. I did not think that was possible." "Why not?" Zachary asked, kissing the top of her head. "Because happiness always seemed like a luxury we could not afford," Ellie said. "Survival was the goal, getting through each day, each season. But now I wake up every morning excited about what the day will bring. That is new." "For me too," Zachary admitted. "Back in Wyoming, I was always working towards something, always thinking about the next goal. But now I am exactly where I want to be, with exactly who I want to be with." As summer turned to fall, the mine began producing more consistently. Dermot's careful planning and new equipment paid off, and they found a rich vein that promised to keep them going for years. The cattle thrived on Montana grass, and Zachary began making plans to expand the herd in the spring. But the best news came in late September when Ellie told Zachary that she was pregnant. "Are you sure?" Zachary asked, hardly daring to believe it. "As sure as I can be," Ellie said. "I know my own body. There is a baby coming, probably in late April or early May." Zachary swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "We are going to be parents," he said, and the enormity of it hit him. "We are going to have a child." "We are," Ellie said, and despite her joy, there was a shadow of fear in her eyes. "I am scared, Zachary. My mother died young. What if I cannot do this?" "You can do anything," Zachary said firmly. "You crossed frozen rivers alone, you run a mining operation, you built a life in one of the hardest territories in the country. You can absolutely do this. And I will be right there with you every step of the way." Ellie's pregnancy was not easy. She suffered from sickness in the early months and had to cut back on some of her more strenuous work. It frustrated her, being limited by her body in ways she never had been before, but Zachary made sure she did not overdo it. "The baby needs you healthy," he would say when she tried to lift something too heavy or insisted on making a supply run despite her exhaustion. "And I need you healthy. Let me take care of you for once." Slowly, Ellie learned to accept help, to let Zachary and her brothers handle things she normally would have done herself. It was hard for her, but Zachary could see her softening, becoming more comfortable with the idea of being cared for. Winter came again, their second in Montana, and this time Zachary made the supply runs while Ellie managed the accounts from home. The Yellowstone froze solid again, and Zachary thought of that first crossing, when he had watched a fierce woman guide a wagon across the ice and known his life was about to change. "What are you smiling about?" Ellie asked one evening as she sat by the fire, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "Just remembering the day we met," Zachary said. "How you told me to get off the ice because you had it under control." "I did have it under control," Ellie said with mock indignation. "I know," Zachary said, moving to sit beside her. "That is what I fell in love with. Your absolute certainty in yourself." "I am not feeling very certain right now," Ellie admitted quietly. "My body feels like it belongs to someone else. I get tired so easily. What if I am not strong enough for this?" "You are the strongest person I have ever met," Zachary said, taking her hand. "And you do not have to do this alone. I am here. Your brothers are here. We are all going to help bring this baby into the world safely." The baby came on a warm night in late April after a labor that lasted nearly 20 hours. Zachary stayed with Ellie the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead, encouraging her when she said she could not go on. The midwife from Livingston had come to help, and Dermot and Finn waited anxiously in the other room. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and his mother's green eyes, Ellie cried with relief and joy. Zachary held his son for the first time and felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of the world. "He is perfect," Zachary whispered. "He is ours," Ellie said, reaching for the baby. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Zachary thought of his mother and all she had sacrificed for him. "What was your father's name?" he asked Ellie. "Sean," Ellie said softly. "Sean Patrick Brennan." "Then let us name him Sean," Zachary said. "Sean Zachary Lawson." Ellie smiled through her tears. "Sean Zachary Lawson, I like that. He will have both of our histories in his name." The months after Sean's birth were exhausting but wonderful. Zachary marveled at how Ellie took to motherhood, the same fierce protectiveness she showed toward the mine and her brothers now directed at their son. But she did not lose herself in it. As soon as she was able, she was back to managing the accounts and planning supply runs, though she let Zachary continue to make the actual crossings. "I will get back to it eventually," she said. "But for now, I am content to let you handle that particular adventure." Sean grew quickly, a healthy and curious baby who seemed fascinated by everything around him. By the time he was a year old, he was walking and getting into everything, exploring the mine and the pastures with fearless enthusiasm. "He is just like you," Zachary told Ellie one day as they watched Sean toddle after a butterfly. "Afraid of nothing, determined to figure everything out on his own." "Heaven help us," Ellie said, but she was smiling. The mine continued to produce well, and the cattle operation expanded. By their third year in Montana, Zachary and Ellie had built something substantial. They hired 2 men to help with the mine work and another to assist with the cattle. Dermot and Finn both married local women, and the mining operation became a true family business. But despite their success and the busyness of their lives, Zachary and Ellie always made time for each other. They would take walks in the evening, Sean riding on Zachary's shoulders, and talk about their days. They would sit on their porch after Sean was asleep and watch the stars, Ellie leaning against Zachary's chest, his arms wrapped around her. "You ever regret it?" Ellie asked one such night. "Giving up your ranch in Wyoming, tying yourself to this place to me?" "Never," Zachary said immediately. "This is the life I was meant to live. You are the person I was meant to love. I have never been more certain of anything." "Good," Ellie said, "because I feel the same way. Sometimes I think about that day on the ice, how easily things could have gone differently. If you had not been there, if I had not let you ride along, if either of us had been less willing to take a chance." "But we were there," Zachary said, "and we did take the chance. That is what matters." Their second child came in the spring of 1886, a daughter they named Rose Margaret after both their mothers. She had Zachary's dark hair and Ellie's determination, and from the moment she could crawl, she was following her older brother everywhere. "We have got our hands full now," Ellie said, watching 3-year-old Sean try to teach baby Rose to stack blocks. "2 little adventurers." "Just like their mother," Zachary said, pulling Ellie close. The years passed in a rhythm of work and family, challenges and triumphs. Montana achieved statehood in 1889, and the Brennan-Lawson mining operation, as it was now called, was one of the more successful in the region. They weathered economic downturns and harsh winters, always supporting each other through the difficult times. Sean grew into a serious boy with his Uncle Dermot's love of geology, while Rose was more interested in the cattle, spending hours with Zachary in the pastures. Watching them grow, Zachary was reminded daily of how much his life had changed since that cold January day when he had watched a woman cross the Yellowstone River alone. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Ellie back to the trading post where they had first met. Pete Morgan was still running it, though he was grayer and slower now. "Look at you two," Pete said, beaming at them. "Built yourselves quite a life, haven't you?" "We have," Ellie said, squeezing Zachary's hand. Thanks in part to you letting this wandering cowboy hang around and pester me. I did not do anything but step aside and let nature take its course, Pete said with a laugh. Anyone could see you two were meant for each other. They walked down to the riverbank, to the spot where Zachary had stood and watched Ellie navigate that dangerous crossing. The river was running high with spring melt, brown and turbulent, nothing like the frozen surface it had been all those years ago. "You remember what you thought when you saw me that day?" Ellie asked. "I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen," Zachary said. "And the most beautiful, though I could barely see your face under all those scarves. But mostly I thought, there is someone who knows exactly who she is and what she is doing. I wanted to know you. I needed to know you. I thought you were insane, stepping out onto that ice," Ellie said with a laugh. "But also brave. And when you actually listened to me when you went back to shore instead of trying to play the hero, that is when I knew you might be different from other men I had met." "Best decision I ever made listening to you," Zachary said. "Worked out pretty well for me, for both of us," Ellie said. She turned to face him, the river rushing behind her, the mountains rising in the distance. "I love you, Zachary Lawson. I love the life we have built together. I love that you never tried to change me, that you let me be exactly who I am." "I love you too," Zachary said. "You are my match in every way, Ellie. My partner, my love, my best friend. I could not imagine doing this life with anyone else." They kissed there on the riverbank, the same place where their story had begun, and Zachary felt the same certainty he had felt on that first day. This was right. This was where he was meant to be. The years continued to roll by. Sean went off to study geology in Denver when he turned 18, planning to return and modernize the mining operation. Rose stayed home and learned the cattle business, showing the same natural talent for it that Zachary had. She eventually married a young rancher from the neighboring valley, and they combined their operations, expanding both. Ellie and Zachary grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies slowing down, but their partnership never wavering. They handed over more of the day-to-day operations to the younger generation, but they never stopped working entirely. Ellie still managed the accounts, and Zachary still checked on the cattle every morning. On a summer evening in 1905, 22 years after they had first met, Zachary and Ellie sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains they had spent more than 2 decades calling home. Their children were grown and thriving, their grandchildren running wild through the property just as Sean and Rose once had. The mine was still producing, the cattle were healthy, and the life they had built together was as solid as the Montana bedrock. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Ellie said, her head resting on Zachary's shoulder in the old familiar way. "What is that?" Zachary asked, his arm around her waist. "That day on the ice," Ellie said. "I was thinking about how scared I actually was, even though I tried not to show it. The ice was cracking, I had all that equipment that we desperately needed, and I was completely alone out there." "You did not look scared," Zachary said. "I have had a lot of practice hiding it," Ellie said, "but I was terrified. And then I looked up and saw you on the shore with that rope, ready to help, and I felt less alone. Even before I knew your name, I felt like you saw me, really saw me." "I did see you," Zachary said. "And I have been looking at you ever since, still amazed every day that you chose to build this life with me." "It was not really a choice," Ellie said softly. "It was more like recognition, like finding something I did not know I had lost." "I know exactly what you mean," Zachary said. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren laughing, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. The mine was quiet for the night, the cattle settled in the pastures, and everything was peaceful. "We did good, didn't we?" Ellie asked. "Built something real, something lasting." "We did better than good," Zachary said. "We built a legacy. Not just the mine or the ranch, but a family, a way of life. Our grandchildren will tell their children about us someday, about how we met and what we created together." "I hope they tell them I crossed the Yellowstone on the ice alone," Ellie said with a smile. "That part is important." "I will make sure they know," Zachary promised. That is how the story starts, with a brave woman ferrying supplies across a frozen river and a cowboy on the shore who watched and knew he had found his match. "That is a good story," Ellie said. "It is the best story," Zachary said. "Because it is ours." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Zachary held his wife close and felt grateful for every moment that had led them here. From that first dangerous crossing to this peaceful evening, it had been an adventure worth taking. They had faced hardship and heartache, had worked until their hands were calloused and their backs ached, had built something from nothing through sheer determination and partnership. But more than anything, they had loved each other. Through all the years and all the challenges, that love had been the foundation everything else was built on. It had started as a spark on a frozen river, grown into a flame through shared work and laughter, and now burned steady and warm, a fire that would never go out. "I would do it all again," Ellie said quietly. "Every hard day, every worry, every moment of fear, I would do it all again for this." "So would I," Zachary said, 1,000 times over. They sat together as the night deepened around them. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life that exceeded anything either had dreamed possible. The Montana wilderness that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving had become home, and the partnership that had begun with a simple offer to help had grown into something unshakable. Inside the house, their family gathered for dinner, voices and laughter spilling out into the evening. Rose was telling stories about her children's latest antics, while Sean explained some new mining technique he wanted to try. Dermot and Finn, both gray-haired now but still sharp as ever, argued good-naturedly about politics. The next generation was growing up surrounded by love and possibility, standing on the foundation that Zachary and Ellie had laid. "We should go in," Ellie said eventually. "They will be wondering where we are." "Let them wonder a bit longer," Zachary said, not ready to move just yet. "I want to hold on to this moment a little while more." "Always the romantic," Ellie said, but she settled back against him, clearly content to stay. "You married me knowing that," Zachary pointed out. "I did," Ellie agreed. "One of my better decisions, as it turns out. Only one of them." Zachary asked with mock indignation. "Well, learning to keep the mine accounts was pretty smart too," Ellie said, her eyes twinkling. "And insisting we expand the cattle operation, and convincing you to build this porch so we would have somewhere to sit and watch the sunsets." "Fair enough," Zachary conceded. "You have made a lot of good decisions, but I think the best one was saying yes when I asked if I could ride along with you that day." "You are probably right about that," Ellie said. She stood and held out her hand to him. "Come on, Cowboy. Our family is waiting, and I am hungry." Zachary took her hand and let her pull him to his feet, marveling as always at how natural it felt to have her hand in his. 22 years of marriage, and it still gave him the same thrill as it had on their wedding day. They walked into the house together, into the warmth and noise and love of the family they had created. And as Zachary looked around the table at his children and grandchildren, at Ellie's brothers and their families, at all the people whose lives had been touched and shaped by the choice he and Ellie had made to build something together, he knew that the cowboy who had stood on that riverbank all those years ago had made the right choice. He had watched a woman ferry supplies across the ice alone, recognized in her the courage and strength he had been searching for all his life, and he had known with absolute certainty that he had found his match. Everything that had come after, all the joy and hard work and love, had flowed from that single moment of recognition, and he would spend the rest of his days grateful for it. As dinner wound down and the family began to disperse to their own homes and rooms, Zachary and Ellie made their way to the bedroom they had shared for more than 2 decades. The room was simple but comfortable, filled with the small touches that made it theirs. The quilt Ellie's mother had made, the photograph of their wedding day, the worn books they read to each other on winter nights. "What a day," Ellie said, sitting on the edge of the bed to remove her boots. "What a life! What a life indeed," Zachary agreed, sitting beside her. "Ready to do it all again tomorrow, always," Ellie said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "As long as we are doing it together." "Together," Zachary agreed. "That is how we have always done it. That is how we always will." They settled into bed, Ellie curling against Zachary's side as she had every night for 22 years. Outside, the Montana night was vast and star-filled, the land they had claimed stretching out in all directions. Inside, in this room, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. "Zachary," Ellie murmured, already half asleep. "Yes, love, I am glad you were there that day, on the shore watching." "So am I," Zachary said softly. "So am I." And as sleep claimed them both, wrapped in each other's arms, the story that had begun with ice and courage and instant recognition continued on. A love story written into the very bones of the Montana territory. A testament to what two people could build when they found their perfect match and chose to hold on tight through whatever came. The years ahead would bring more challenges and more joys, more grandchildren and great-grandchildren, more sunsets watched from their porch and more quiet mornings over coffee. They would grow old together, their love deepening and strengthening with each passing season. And when the time came for them to leave this world, they would do it as they had done everything else, together, certain in the knowledge that their love had created something that would endure long after they were gone. But that was still far in the future. For now, in this moment, they slept peacefully in each other's arms. Two people who had taken a chance on love and found that it was the best decision either of them had ever made. The brave woman who had crossed the frozen river alone, and the cowboy who had watched from the shore and known his life was about to change forever. They had found each other, built a life together, and proved that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single moment of courage and the willingness to say yes to possibility. Their legacy would live on in their children and grandchildren, in the mine and ranch that still bore their names, in the stories that would be told around dinner tables for generations to come. It was, in the end, exactly the kind of happily ever after they had both earned through hard work, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to each other. And as the Montana stars wheeled overhead and the night wind whispered through the pines, Zachary and Ellie Lawson rested easy, knowing they had lived fully, loved completely, and created something beautiful that would never fade.